Hey everybody, this is Dream. I hope everybody did well yesterday in a nice little small slate. We were on target with the teams to target, so that is good. So let's go ahead and get into the slate today. Now we end up with a giant slate today as opposed to a small one like yesterday, where we have 12 games on the slate. We do have some weather concerns. The Boston-New York Yankee game, Detroit-Cincinnati game, San Francisco versus Cleveland, and Philly versus Atlanta all have weather concerns. However, they all should play. It doesn't look like they're going to be super serious, but we could see a couple delays through those. So let's go ahead and get into the slate, though. So we have some pitching situation here that's very deep, actually, as a pitching slate, but it is fairly expensive as well. And there's not a lot of value on this slate from a pitching perspective either. That there is kind of one Hail Mary at the bottom, but for the most part, I think that this slate is going to be somewhat difficult because the pitching is pretty expensive on the slate. And there's not a lot of value in the cheaper side of things. So let's go ahead and get into those. Obviously, before I do that, though, let's go ahead and start talking about the fact that we have a game in Colorado with Kansas City and Colorado. Now, Kansas City looks fantastic today. And so there's going to be a lot of Kansas City opportunity here. Trying to figure out which guys to use, I think, in the outfield with their Renfroe and Blank are the top tier ones. But I also like the catchers, but there's multiple catchers available there. So there's a lot of different ways you could stack up a Kansas City stack today, but they're definitely going to be the team to target. They're going to be high owned as well as a result of that. So let's go ahead and get in the slate, though. Let's look at our pitchers first. So Tyler Glass now is the most expensive option. He's also the best option on the slate. He's very close to being a core play. The only reason that I didn't make him a core play is the matchup. However, he's been absolutely phenomenal all season long. He's only had a couple off games. In fact, one of his off games was last game that he played, but he's got good strikeout potential today. He's got a huge, really good metrics overall, and he's going to be a really solid option on the slate. He'll also be pretty high owned. He'll be the second or one of the top two in the high ownership on the slate. So he looks fantastic today. Then we're going to look at some GPP plays with Tanner Bibby for Cleveland. Now, he's been up and down this season, but the good matchup here and a decent K rate. He's a good contrarian option off of Glass now if you want, or he could be your second pitcher too, as he's got one of the better matchups. However, San Francisco's been weird this season, and they do have tendency to have decent games, but he does have a decent enough K rate, so he's definitely worth a look. Max Fried is also in play, though he has a tough matchup against Philly. He's been a little bit inconsistent this season, and he had a bad game against Philly the first time he played them. He's not got the highest ceiling either, but the matchup does give him some utility, and he will be a low-owned option, so he's definitely got some upside from that perspective. Aaron Nola looks interesting for Philly today. He's got some good upside today as well. If he was facing anyone else, then I would definitely make him a core play, but he is facing a tougher matchup today against Atlanta. It's not the worst. He's had better games than he had a bad game against Atlanta before, but he's had better games this season against tougher teams. But he's definitely a little bit risky on this one, so he's very close to being a really good play. But he's also he ends up being a GPP play as a result. Cole Reagans is going to be the highest owned player on the slate likely because this matchup against Colorado. Now this game is in Colorado, so that does hurt him a little bit because that does give a little bit of risk. But the Colorado Rockies look pretty shabby today. I don't really like anybody on that team, so he's going to be a high ownership play, which does make him a little bit of a fade to me, but he's definitely a good second pitcher regardless of that. And if you're going to play in the cash games, you definitely utilize him today. Some extreme GPP plays today will be Pablo Lopez, Nestor Cortez, and Kevin Gausman. And then some Hail Mary plays would be Tanner Hoke, Albert Suarez, who's a little bit cheaper for Baltimore against Oakland, and then Spencer Bivens for San Francisco Giants against Cleveland, though he will be the guy coming off after the first guy starts the game. So let's go ahead and look at our catchers today. We have a pretty solid catching situation here, though it is fairly expensive on the top with Salvador Perez, but obviously he has fantastic metrics in this game against Colorado. At Colorado, he's got good home run upside. He's just super expensive, and he does need a home run today to pay off there. Now, the other way you could go here is Freddie Furman for the Kansas City as well. He's also got good home run metrics today and good hitting metrics as well, and he's nicely priced at $3,900. So he is very close to being a core play for me. The only reason he's not is because there's so many good options at the catching position and his price range. Some others to look at: Danny Jansen Danny Jansen for Toronto. He looks really solid. Even though it's a tougher matchup, I think he's a viable play. And I think Toronto is going to be a sneaky stackable team on the slate. Obviously, they face a decent pitcher, but he's been struggling. Looking at Hunter Goodman for Colorado, he'd be the one-off guy from Colorado that I think has some potential today. He's got the best metrics on the team, So he's definitely worth a look from that perspective. But the top ownership today will be Salvador Perez, Freddie Fermin, and Adley Rutschman. And the low-owned upside guys would be Will Smith from the Dodgers and Danny Jansen. Looking at our first baseman, Vinny Pasquantino also looks solid today. He does have home run metrics. He usually has struggled on the road this season, but this game has some added upside to him, so he's definitely an interesting play. Though there's a lot of really solid plays today, and there's actually a couple guys I think are a little bit better based on prices. But Josh Naylor also has good home run metrics in this game against San Francisco. And then if we want to get cheap, a little cheaper here, Ryan Mountcastle, he jumps off the page as a great play at this position. I feel like he's a little bit safer today than Pasquantino is, just because he's played better lately. But the top ownership at this position will be Otani, Mountcastle, Pasquanto. Salvador Perez can also fit in here as he can has first base potential, and Yandy Diaz is kind of a contrarian play for Tampa Bay, who's been playing pretty well lately. The low-owned upside options on this team will be Freddie Freeman, Vlad Jr., Christian Walker, and Spencer Horwitz. So I think all those guys have some utility on the slate as well. Looking at second base here, Miguel Garcia will have absolutely fantastic metrics on the slate. Now, he is expensive, and I don't really like paying for him here because he does need a home run at this price point to pay off, and he's not really a huge home run hitter, but he does have that multi-hit potential. Also from Kansas City, Nick Lofton. Now, his metrics are actually really solid for this game, despite the fact that he struggled this season. He doesn't need to score a ton of fantasy points, though, at just $3,800, but he's actually priced up a little bit due to his situation here. Andres Jimenez is also interesting for Cleveland. He's kind of a one-off for them, but he does draw some good potential today. Again, not a huge home run guy, but just good hitting potential. Marcus Semien might be my favorite play on the team just because he's got the best hitting upside on the slate when it comes to also having a home run potential. But the top ownership at this position will be some cheap guys, and Brandon Lowe, Colt Keith, Nick Lofton, Garrett Hampson, then Markel Garcia and Ketel Marte, and the low-owned upside guys, Jordan Westberg, Spencer Horwitz, and Kevin Biggio. You're going to see some similar options at third base here, but I think there's some better plays at the top here with Jose Ramirez for Cleveland. He looks absolutely fantastic and prime for a home run today. He's obviously super expensive and needs that. Nick Lofton can also play in here, but Isaac Paredes also looks really solid for Tampa Bay, and he's nicely priced. He's also been hitting the ball pretty well lately, and so he's somebody that was really close to making a core play as well. He's also going to be the top owned at this position, along with Matt Fairling and Nick Lofton. There's some low-owned upside options here: Jordan Westberg, Kevin Biggio, and Manny Machado. Looking at shortstop, Bobby Witt Jr., he's been phenomenal this season. He does draw some good metrics today as well. He's also been hitting the ball extremely well the last few games, has multiple home runs. And so I do think he's a great play on the slate. But Corey Seager is a nice cheap play. When I say cheap, $5,000 is not cheap, but he's been hitting the ball pretty well, and he's $1,800 cheaper than Bobby Witt, which is helpful. Ella De La Cruz also has fantastic metrics today. He's getting some stolen bases last couple games. Obviously, he's super expensive. He needs to get a couple stolen bases or a home run to pay off, but he's definitely capable of that today. And then Bo Bichette is kind of a contrarian play. If he ends up playing today, then he'd be somebody I would consider, as he's hit the ball better well lately, but now he's day-to-day, so we'll have to wait and see if he gets back on this one. The top ownership at this position will be Bobby Witt Jr. and Gunnar Henderson, and then the low-owned upside guy would be Miguel Rojas. So looking at outfielders, this slate is going to be pretty deep with $4,000 price guys. But our three expensive options: Juan Soto for the Yankees, Jordan Alvarez for the Houston Astros, and then Riley Green for Detroit. These are my favorite options for home runs at the expensive side of things. I think all three of them have really good metrics today and have a lot of potential. However, for value, Hunter Renfroe and Blanco for Kansas City both have absolutely fantastic metrics to this in this game, and so I think both of them are very viable fantasy plays, especially at their price points. Obviously, they're going to be somewhat highly owned today, but they definitely have that potential today. Jazz Chisholm Jr. for Miami also looks really solid today, though he is a contrarian play. He's been hitting the ball decently well lately with 4 hits in the last 5 games, so he definitely draws some potential here. And a plus matchup, Corbin Carroll also looks really solid despite the struggles he's had this season. He's a little bit pricey, though, but he has looked good a couple times recently, and in those games he's done pretty well. Some other guys to consider: Josh Lowe for Tampa Bay, Adalis Garcia, for Texas, Perez for Detroit here, has some really good metrics and he's a little bit cheaper today. And then Max Kepler and Trevor Larnach for Minnesota look pretty decent on this slate as well. The top ownerships at this position will be Corbin Carroll, Otani, Hunter Renfroe, Garrett Hampson, Andrew Benintendi, and then some other top ownership options: Austin Hayes, Perez, Jazz Chisholm, and Matt Vierling. The low-owned upside guys today: Anthony Santander, Darian Blanco, Jordan Alvarez, Colton Cowser, and Toscar Hernandez. Also Jose Siri, George Springer, Dalton Varsho, Richie Palacios, and Jake Meyer.